Morning, everyone. Morning. Thank you for spending time with me this morning. For a presentation that's talking about 2025, I'm going to talk a lot about human beings and people. And I was just telling Ashu that even though here I am giving you a big presentation, I'm still somebody's little boy. There was an earthquake in San Francisco last night, or the Bay Area, not a big one. I live in San Francisco, and my mother is still texting me, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" So remember that in 2025, that's still going to be happening. The future is broad, it's vast, there's lots of changes, but human relationships still matter. I wanted to give you a quote that talks just about that. So Neil is the co-founder and currently splits CEO duties at Warby Parker, obviously one of the hot brands over the last couple of years in the eyeglass world. If you can see my glasses close up, you know that I do not wear Warby Parker. But I love this quote. And the reason that I love this quote is, and this is something I'm going to circle back to over and over and over again, if we want to provide the kind of customer experiences that make our customers actually have positive experiences with our brands, we need to focus on the emotional component of those interactions that we have with them. Whether that's human to human, whether that's human to automation or machine, there is an emotional element that we need to pay attention to. Forrester does a very large survey, more than 100,000 consumers every year, and we're asking them about their experiences with the brands with which they do business or interact. We're asking about specific brands. So what was your experience with AT&T? What was your experience with Wells Fargo? And we rate them, right? We rate the brands, and it's our customer experience index. We're looking at a couple of hundred brands across nearly 24 industries. And we find that there are three main drivers of a customer's perception of their experience with brands. There's effectiveness. Could you get done what you wanted to get done? Ease. How easy was it for you to do what you needed to do? And if you're going to guess that the third element also starts with an E, you're right, because we're trying to make it easy. We call it the 3 E's. That third element is emotion. How did it make you feel? Right? Just like a good Rogerian psychotherapist. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? It turns out that when we actually dig in deeper into the data, emotion is a bigger driver than the other two elements. I'm going to say that again because this is a crowd that works in customer service, knows what contact centers are like, and knows the metrics that run contact centers. Emotion is more important in driving a customer's perception of their experience with your brand than effectiveness. Our metrics have been around effectiveness. We've started to think about ease from things like customer effort scores and opening up new channels. Over in the demo area, I saw a way to use Apple Business Chat with eGain, right? We're opening up new channels to make it easier for customers. But emotion, there might have been an empathy score on an agent scorecard somewhere once upon a time. Like maybe we were thinking about it. But really, Neil is right. If we actually want to collaborate with our customers effectively and with each other, we need to focus on the emotional element. There is a maybe apocryphal story, but it's one that I love anyway, about Mohandas Gandhi, the Mahatma. Gandhi and some of his compatriots were rushing to catch a train. And the train was pulling out of the station as they arrived. So they were rushing and rushing, and as Gandhi set foot on the stairway, his sandal on one of his feet fell off onto the tracks. But the train's picking up speed, there are other people who need to get on the train behind him, so he can't get off and pick up his sandal. Everybody gets on the train behind him. Gandhi takes off his other sandal and throws it down the tracks. All of his compatriots are like, "Why did you do that? Why did you lose the one sandal you do have?" And he said, "Well, think about the poor guy who's going to find one sandal. What good is it going to do him If he finds a pair of sandals, he can make use of them. Gandhi, in that example, I think, was providing the best customer service you can think of, right? He was predicting ahead what the emotional experience of another person was going to be. So I am here to talk about the reality where we're not paying attention to that enough in our world, and then the tsunami of technology changes that are enabling new kinds of experiences colliding with us misunderstanding what drives great customer service experiences. Think about brands like these. So you've got Uber taking on the taxi industry and also flaunting regulations whenever they can. You've got Glossier remaking the beauty industry. Glossier, for those who don't know, is essentially the biggest cult brand that I know of over the last 5 years. The adherents of that cult love it, and it's doing it through a less is more approach. Glossier wants to make it so that nobody is ever accused of having too much makeup. It always is subtle and underdone, right? And then Stitch Fix, changing this notion of retail, but by doing so through emotional connection. Let us work with you to find the ideal look for you, and we will keep you in that look. But it is a human connection that they're building. Really, when we think about customer service, though, we have to start to think about human beings as the customer side and the employee side. They're two different things. We can drive positive customer experiences, or we can focus on positive employee experiences. I would argue that you actually can't focus on positive customer experiences until you focus on positive employee experiences. That the employee experiences drive the customer service interactions and the customer experiences that derive from them. And that is true even in a world where we're automating a lot of the interactions. Right? And so we have to focus on ease, effectiveness, and emotion, as I mentioned, on the customer side. On the employee side, we actually do have mnemonics. This is not using them, but productivity, facilitation, and connection. Okay, really, let's think about that. Productivity, the employees can get done what they need to do, very much like effectiveness. Facilitation is kind of ease. Right? How easy is it for you? Is your company, your organization, helping you do the job that you're being tasked to do? And then connection is just the flip side of emotion, right? Do I feel connected with my work, with the customers that I am dealing with? Do I feel a sense of purpose? Now, I know a lot of you have probably read both research and also just anecdotal blather about how the next generations behind us only care about purpose in their work. They want to feel like they are on a mission. A mission-driven organization will be better at attracting them. Whether it's true or not, it seems like a good thing to be fostering. It turns out, and you guys who actually run contact centers can tell me if I'm wrong, but the contact centers I've talked to, the agents and the supervisors, it is true. They do want to understand why they're a cog in that particular process, what that process does, not just their little piece of it, but the whole thing. They want a view of the whole process of your organization, the whole reason, the raison d'etre of your organization. Why do you even care about all of this, though? Right? Great customer experiences driven by great employee experiences actually do impact the things that your boss's boss's boss and the board of your organizations care about. The brands that do the best in our customer experience index see an improvement in retention, customer retention. Customers will buy from them over and over. They will buy more products, and also they will pay more for those products or services. And in the world of NPS being the North Star for a lot of organizations, they also become customer advocates. The brands that do the best in customer experience create the most advocates. That's why NPS matters. I think NPS is obviously an effect, not a driver here. You can manage towards NPS, but really what you're talking about here is, are you driving the kind of experiences that make people talk about you in a positive light. So I know I'm supposed to be talking about 2025, and here I am 10 minutes in, and I haven't talked about the future at all. So let's move on to the future. But I did want to lay that groundwork, and I'm going to come back to that emotion, empathy piece quite often. So I'm going to give you a disclaimer and then a prediction. The disclaimer is that I am a technology industry analyst. I work with brands like yours to help them create digital-first customer service experiences. I am not an economist. I am not a political theorist. I cannot tell you what the impact of a hard Brexit, a soft Brexit, a negotiated Brexit, impeachment that actually results in a Senate trial. I have no idea what that's going to do to our economy. So that's the disclaimer. My 2025 is not taking that into account at all. My prediction, however, is that if those elements of the world, Brexit, recession, potential recession, impeachment, whatever, actually really start to impact the economy broadly, I know what's going to happen in customer service. We're going to repeat the mistakes that we made in 2008, 2009. So just a show of hands, how many of you remember Get Human? I mean, I can't see in the back, but there are only a few. So in 2008, 2009, we hit a recessionary period. Brands started to say, we need to automate everything we can, take cost out of the business, which is funny because contact centers are always trying to take cost out of the business, but now you really need to get a little bit more blood from that particular turnip. Squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it. We deployed lots and lots and lots of terrible IVRs, just terrible. Get Human was kind of a groundswell movement started by a guy called Paul English, but fed by the wisdom of the crowds, that was designed specifically to help consumers defeat IVRs and get to a human, as the name said. What's going to happen if the recessionary period hits again? We're going to do the same thing, except now we're going to be calling it chatbots, and we're going to have lots and lots and lots of really bad chatbots thrown out there simply because we need to take cost out of the business. So that's my prediction. So be careful. We can avoid that, but I doubt we will. I'm a skeptic at heart. With that, let's get on to 2025, which was actually the title of my presentation here, right? We're going to look at telepathic automation, self-healing relationships, implantable communications. Okay, well, maybe not. I just made that up. I have no idea what half of that means. I don't even know what a self-healing relationship is. I've been traveling so much this year, I think I need one of those with my wife, hopefully. It will self-heal? No, I know I need to work at it. No, 2025 is actually just an extrapolation of where we are today. We are not seeing the sort of epochal change that might happen in other times. Why? Because we already know where the technology is headed directionally. It's more a question of how fast it's going to get there than what it is that we're heading towards. So let's go back to the Warby Parker guy, Neil. Let's start with human vulnerability, right? Human-to-human interactions are not going to go away by 2025. We're not going to fire all of our agents in the next 5 years, nor should we want to. I'm going to say that one again, too, because sometimes, even when we can automate processes, interactions, we might choose not to intentionally because emotion is the biggest driver of a customer's perception of their experience with your brand, and humans can provide human empathy. They can deal with emotionally fraught situations, at least if you've done your hiring and training correctly, they can, in a way that automation simply can't. There are times where the opposite is true as well. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. One where you definitely want human beings involved, even though automation is possible. The other is where brands have found that automation actually provides a better emotional experience than human beings. So really, although I'm saying you don't necessarily want to automate, The core of it is you need to understand the emotional impact of what you are trying to do and use that to make the decision about whether automation makes sense or humans make sense. In 2025, we're actually going to see algorithmic ways of figuring that out. You're not literally going to have to map out every process. We're going to have enough data to say this is something that a human being needs to deal with. Let's start with the area where automation actually provides a better emotional experience than human connection. In the collections world, you've got people who, either rightfully or wrongly, are owing money to a brand. There is some level of embarrassment to that, being behind in payments. In some cultures, it's actually just downright bloody shameful. In Northern Europe, for example, it's really bad to be in debt. But even here in the US, where we're more brazen about that, just think of our president, it's fine. It's still bad. And so when collections agencies contact customers, what they find is that it's often, statistically often, easier to get a customer to set up a payment plan with the brand if they are dealing with an automated system because they do not have that human embarrassment of trying to work it out with an agent. You can try and guilt them into it, but it just makes them feel worse. So automation actually is better at it. The corollary to that, however, is that when collections agencies do an analysis of those payment plans, they find that the human-to-human interaction can actually get a larger upfront payment than automation can. So there's a nuance here. You can get more upfront, but you're less likely to get a payment plan set up if you have a human. And if you have automation, it may be less that you're going to get back, but you're more likely to get something back, right? Because emotion is tricky here. That guilt apparently works if you're willing to actually set up the payment plan and you're not dodging the calls and hanging up on them or whatever, you may set up a plan for more than if you're dealing with automation. Let's do the flip side here. Where is it that sometimes, even when you can automate, you probably shouldn't? Well, we have a client, a very large top 5 insurer that offers life insurance. What happens when a policyholder dies? Right? Well, they have to pay out the benefits to whoever the beneficiary is. One of the key elements of their process here is identifying who the beneficiary is based on the policy and then validating and authenticating that the person they are paying is the person named in the policy. It would be really bad, so I've been told. I'm not an insurer, but I think I trust them. It's really bad if you pay the wrong person. Who knew? And so think about our experiences today. It's not that hard to use automation to authenticate somebody, right? Voice biometrics can do it. We have lots of different automated systems that can authenticate you as who you say you are. But this insurer, wisely in my mind, actually took apart that process and said, all right, who in their customer journey mapping, who is the customer here? The customer is the beneficiary of the policy at that point, right? They're the one that the brand actually has to deal with. That person likely just lost a parent, a spouse, a grandmother, whoever named them in their policy probably had some deep emotional connection to this person. Otherwise, they wouldn't have named them the beneficiary of the policy. And they thought, all right, this is an emotionally fraught moment for this person in this person's life. We want to present human empathy here. We know we can automate this. We can automate 60% of the upfront piece of the interactions that we're going to have with that beneficiary, but we don't want to. Again, emotion will drive the experience, and therefore we want the emotional component to be human empathy being provided. So what am I saying about this? Well, I'm saying two things. One, Again, we're going to have algorithmic ways to determine whether a human being or automation is the best suited for a particular part of an interaction in 5 years. We're already seeing this in the world of conversational AI, right? Where there are things that automation does better than a human being and things that human beings do better than automation, and we can interweave them both in the course of a single interaction with a customer. So that's piece one. But piece two is, let's recognize what we're actually doing to the human beings who work for us. We're saying that you need to provide empathy in this interaction, empathy in the next interaction, empathy in the next interaction. The next one is something that is so complex that automation can't handle it. The next one is both, right, emotionally fraught and complex. It used to be, like today, an agent's work life is easy interaction, hard interaction, medium interaction, easy interaction. 5 years from now, because simple automation will work and because of this emotional component, the nature of the work that your employees are going to have to do will be radically different. It will be complex thing after complex thing after complex thing with emotional moments thrown in there, right? Just as little sprinkles on top to make that ice cream sundae even sweeter for them. We're asking a lot of these people. And so what we are going to see 5 years from now is kind of the fruition of a journey we've already started. And actually, if you go out to the demo area, you'll see the sort of seed elements of a lot of the things that I'm talking about here. We're talking about the technologically augmented agent, right? We're talking about predictive systems that actually help that agent get through those complex processes. We're talking about conversational assistants, where a conversational AI, we can think of it as a chatbot, we can think of it as a virtual agent, whatever, is providing conversational assistance, literally the text that needs to go into a digital interaction to that agent. We're talking about things like emotion detection, right? What is the emotional state of that customer? And can you provide me, the agent, the behavioral cues that I need to get through that and respond to it? Yes, I'm here to provide human empathy, but there's something called empathy fatigue, which is if you're asked to provide empathy over and over and over and over again, you burn out, right? That's how people living in San Francisco and New York and other big cities walk over homeless people and don't think twice about it, because the first 100 times you see it, it's heartbreaking. And after that, if you still cared every single time, you'd lose your mind. That happens to agents as well. And so these systems that can actually help them say, remember, there's a human being on the other end here, and they're feeling like, upset, or they're feeling frustrated, and here's how you deal with it, that is going to become part and parcel of an agent's daily life. We're also seeing some elements today down on the bottom. I mentioned the behavioral cues. There are some tools out there that provide very simple behavioral cues, like you're talking too fast. There's too much overtalk. You're talking over the customer. Let them finish their sentence. That's going to get much more complex in the next 5 years. Right now, that's fairly generic. It's not contextual. It's not doing anything based on who that customer is. It's just what that customer is saying in some kind of speech analytics, analyzing the emotional content. And then personality-driven matching is another thing that we see today. There are a couple of vendors who offer something like that. They build a personality profile of the agent, they build personality profiles of the customer, and they try and match them. Not saying that I have to communicate with somebody just like me. There are complementary communication styles. Again, that does not use context. That is, you normally are this kind of communicator, but I'm only that when, I'm not way in debt talking to a collections agency, because that's much more stressful. So we're going to see context get added into this in the next 5 years to augment agents. I said that the work is going to change. I think the actual jobs are going to change as well. What we think of as tier 1 by 2025, particularly the triage kind of agent, that role just disappears. There's not really a need for that, right? There's not a lot of emotional component of figuring out what the problem is, if the problem is a router or the problem is this. The emotional component is I can't get my internet to work and I have to email my mother because she's worried about the earthquake, right? That's the important piece. So we're going to shift away from that tier 1 figuring out exactly what the problem is and focusing on that tier 3, tier 4 knowledge worker kind of idea of we're here to actually fix the problem, deal with your emotional state. There's also this subject matter expert idea. So how many of you are familiar with Pier 1? Pier 1? All right, a lot of hands went up. It's a home decor retailer, right, in the US. Pier 1 used to do the very standard model for building out a contact center. They chose a location. They're based in Dallas, so their big contact center was in the suburbs of Dallas. And then they hired people who lived within commuting distance of that contact center, and then they trained them in the wonders of Pier 1. What they were finding is they were not building that emotional connection that I talked about earlier with customers that way, because they're taking anyone off the street and saying, we can train them in the wonders of home decor. They were not getting the conversion that they hoped for from those agents, because those agents not only have to tell you whether they've got those throw pillows in jacquard loom red or whatever. I made that up. I think that's a thing. I'm not a home decor expert myself. I don't work for Pier 1. Or whatever, right? Whatever they're discussing, whatever home decor they're discussing, they have to help you find the right thing, but they also want to upsell, cross-sell, say, hey, that would go really great with this throw blanket that we have, and it matches exactly, and it will bring out the color of your room. They could not get the agents that they hired to do that, and so they rethought their program. And now, today, they are doing things like recruiting from Instagram. They're finding people who actually have a passion and an avocation for home decor, and they will teach them customer service. That is a subject matter expert being brought in. Do they pay those people more? Yes, they had to pay those people more. Those people do not tend to be college students, although there are some in fashion and interior decorating who are now working there part-time. So they have that element, but they also just have people who are passionate about it. That passion comes through to the customers, and what they're seeing is significantly higher conversion from those agents than the ones before. The other thing that had to change is they could not find enough of those people within commuting distance of their brick and mortar contact center, and so they started to think about work at home, because we want to expand the labor pool to people who care about home decor. We don't care about the commuting distance. We're hiring more mature people, we're paying them more, but they're making us more money, so the economics of it works out. And to circle back to the theme again, and again, they're providing a better emotional experience to the customers that are interacting with them because they're passionate about the same thing that that customer is. That is going to become a much more typical model 5 years from now. Again, I don't know what a recessionary environment might do to that. That might blow up my theory. But let's assume steady state from where we are today. That is a way that you start to build out that emotional connection. And then new jobs. New jobs will emerge. We have bot mechanics. We have bot masters. Conversational designers, data scientists, and app developers. Those exist today. But it's not that common to find them in a customer service organization, as part of the customer service organization. That's who they work for. But that is going to be the norm because we're going to need those people, obviously. But let's talk about the top two jobs there that are in the far right. So a bot mechanic. A bot mechanic is very much like an auto mechanic. An auto mechanic does not design or build cars. They just fix them when they're broken. That's their job. So a bot mechanic is not the person who's designing the bot. They are just the people who make sure that they're doing ongoing tuning. They do the tune-ups. They do the engine check light is on, how do I fix it kind of work. How does that play out? Well, we're seeing a little bit of this today where agents, regular agents, are being asked to essentially give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to a chatbot's intent detection. Here's what the customer said. Here's what the chatbot thought it meant. Is that right? Often that happens when that interaction has been escalated to an agent. right? Because something went wrong, right? So where did it go wrong? You, the agent, help, because it's going to help you do your job better, because you're not going to get people who tried to self-serve and fail then get angry at you, the agent, when you didn't have anything to do with it. So there is some enlightened self-interest in this job. Is this going to be a full-time job, or is this going to be little bits of work that get pushed to agents? I actually think that this is going to be woven into the daily life of these kind of knowledge workers and subject matter experts. Why? Because it is a mental break from complex interaction after complex interaction, emotionally fraught interaction after emotionally fraught interaction. Right? Today, you have those easy calls that act as a mental refresh if you're an agent. When those go away, we need to figure out ways to keep those agents from burning out. And interstitially sticking in different pieces of work that's just like a refresh for them. So we're going to see that work taken over. Now, bot supervisor is a term I liked. My colleague got there first, published something calling it Botmaster, so I'm going with Botmaster. How many of you saw, I think it was last week, no, 2 weeks ago, the baggage vehicle going crazy at O'Hare? Okay, well, for those who haven't, here it is again, because it explains this Botmaster concept. Well, sort of. So there we go. Love this thing. I love how it never actually hits the plane, which is amazing. Look how close it just got to that plane. It never hits it. All right, and then there we go. There we go. So that guy, that's the bot master. When the bot goes crazy, human ingenuity needs to be injected into the process to fix it. My idea of the bot master is pretty simple, actually. You've got a human being who is monitoring 5, 6 different automated conversations and seeing where they are likely to go off the rails and injecting their human expertise into the process so that they remain on the rails. I'm using rails as my metaphor here because somebody gave me this metaphor that I loved. I did not play with toy trains when I was a kid, but I had a friend who was obsessed with them and had this massive setup that took up the entire basement, and he lived in a very large house. And what happened when the trains went off the track? He, the human, would just take the train, put it back on the track, and then pat it on the caboose, and off it would go, right? What we're doing today is we're taking the train, putting it back on the track, and holding it as we walk it around the track and walk it around the track. That's what happens when we're escalating an interaction to a human being. But obviously, this model is better, also funnier. Right? It's a great way to think about it. What does that human intervention look like? Well, that human intervention can be simply, okay, you got the wrong intent, this is the correct intent. It could be, I, the human being, take over the interaction for part of the interaction and then hand it back to the bot once it's back on track, and the customer never knows that there was a human being involved. Now, I would not recommend that you do the opposite of that, which is pretend that a bot is a human, but it's okay to pretend that a human is a bot if, in fact, it is sandwiched between bot interactions. Then you're not providing a crazy expectation of the customer that you're not meeting. Right? So it's those kinds of things where the bot master will emerge. And is that a full-time job, or is that mixed in with work? I think the answer is both. I think there are people who are going to be doing this full-time. They're going to be what contact center agents are today. But you can also imagine the same thing that I said before, using this as a way to provide a mental break to somebody who's just dealing with corner case after corner case, upset customer after upset customer, right? So that's the bot master idea. Now, I'm just kind of taking it as a given, I think, that self-service is going to be a big part of what we're doing 5 years from now. I think, though, that it will improve dramatically. Not so much the actual self-service, but the use cases to which we're putting self-service, right? We now do the lower pieces of this step, right? We're providing better customer support, right? We have 24/7 support because customers can reach out to us at any time of day through our self-service. We're influencing revenue, right? I know that, for example, the North Face has a product selection bot. And if I want to buy a winter coat, it can help me find a winter coat that's rated down to 0 degrees in red. And so it is actually driving revenue. What it does not do, however, that North Face bot, is answer my question when I say, hey, I'm going camping in the Sierra Mountains next weekend, what do I need to buy? And that is kind of where we're going, because then you start to drive customer engagement. You start to bring in the context of who that customer is, what they've bought from us in the past, so I'm not recommending a sleeping bag to you when I know that you just bought a sleeping bag rated to -5 degrees. And I know from the context that I have as a bot that it's going to be 20 in the Sierras next week. Right? I can bring all of that context together and actually start to drive better engagement, real advice. And that advice can be pulled from a knowledge base. It can be pulled from other interactions that other agents have had, kind of the wisdom of the crowds now powering the interaction that I'm having with the self-service automation system. And then finally, redefining the notion of customer success. This one's always bugged me. There's a whole field of software called customer success. But really, it's recurring revenue management. That's really what it's doing. But customer success implies something broader, right? It's how do we actually help our customers succeed with our products and services? And if you look at it from a customer service or contact center point of view, you start to recognize the power of this. Because if we can get our customers onboarded properly and teach them to use our products and services, we don't get the calls, chats, SMSs, or Apple Business Chat interactions further down the line when the customer is either disappointed because the product doesn't do what they thought they did, or they're confused because they don't know how to do it. We've already trained them. We can start to use self-service to do this. Have we thought about this? Yeah, for years, right? I mean, it was, 5 years ago that cable companies start to send out those video bill explainers for your first bill because they knew that customer signs up, 30 days later, they get a bill, 31 days later, they call into the contact center and say, what's this charge? What's that charge? And so they were trying to fight this with a customized bill explainer video. It didn't work very well because the technology was not pulling in enough context. It wasn't customized enough. And a video is not actually the best way to start explaining something. Something like co-browse, looking at the actual bill would be a good way to explain a bill. We can do that in self-service. Will we be doing it 5 years from now? Yeah, I think so. What does that mean though, right? This lovely mess. I love this. This is actually the diagram of the systems that an agent interacts with at one of the big telcos in the US. Agents are flipping between about 20 screens. It takes agents about 9 months to get trained up, fully trained up. The problem is not that they have such a long training cycle, although that is obviously problematic. It's that they see churn for a lot of agents at about 6 months. So they never get anybody fully trained because they have this. They have this crazy mess. So first thing we have to do when we start to think about how to drive these emotionally cogent interactions, human to human, is think about how to build out the tools that the agents are going to use. So I put this in 4 phases. I think phase 1 is what we're doing today. Phase 2 is also what we're doing today. We're starting to see robotic process automation make its way into a lot of an agent's work. I'm even seeing that now combined not just with things like an agent desktop, but with chatbots and conversational AI. One of our clients, rather than doing the sensible thing and fixing their systems that are broken, they said, well, let's throw RPA in as a Band-Aid. We've got 4 different systems in which an address change needs to occur. In the past, an agent would swivel chair or alt-tab between those 4 systems to change a customer's address. Now, they have a chatbot that faces the agent. The agent says, hey, I need to change the address for Ian Jacobs. He starts to enter in, he or she, enter the information into the bot. The bot does the validation. Yes, that's a valid address. No, that's not. Hey, I think you mistyped the city. Can you tell me the correct city? And then RPA takes over from the bot and changes it in 4 systems. So we're seeing that today, but going forward, we're going to start to see real effectiveness tools, right? Agent-facing chatbots that do more than just change address, but actually help the agent do the complex work. And then 5 years from now, we're really going to start to see these prescriptive tools make their way into the daily life, minute by minute, of the human beings who actually have to interact with our customers. Things like next best action, again, something we've been doing forever, but I'm going to talk about context a little later. I've talked about it before or mentioned it. We're actually really going to start to weave context in here to drive a very different notion of what next best action is. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the next slide. You'll get a copy of these slides, so you don't actually need to worry about taking photos of them if you don't want to. We do the analog to the customer experience index for employees, and it's called the Employee Experience Index. Wow, we're really creative in our naming at Forrester, aren't we? But really what we're doing is in the same way that we were looking at what elements actually drive customer experience, ease, effectiveness, emotion, ease, effectiveness, emotion. Hopefully you got the 3 E's. What we actually found for workers is, I don't know why they didn't come up with a 3rd E in the middle there, but it's empower, inspire, and enable. I'm sure I could come up with a synonym for inspire that starts with an E at some point. But when we actually tried to break it down and say which is the biggest piece, it turns out that empowering your employees, giving them the freedom, the feeling that they are free to do the job the best way they think it needs to be done, is actually the biggest driver of whether those employees feel like they are doing purposeful work, are engaged with your brand, and are engaged with your customers. I also think that the inspire piece is important. Because one, we think about it as leadership, inspiring, but think back to that mission-driven approach that I talked about. That's also feeling inspired. Do I understand what this interaction actually means to the brand? I'm just a little cog in a big machine. What is my purpose here? What am I doing that's actually helping, the shareholder value or my colleague? Whoever it is, I want to feel that connection. The other thing, though, that we're seeing start to shift is organizations themselves and how they're dealing with labor broadly, not just contact center. The customer service and contact center organizations and the changes that they are going through today actually map pretty well to the change that organizations more broadly are going to take. So I did not create this graphic. I never would have. It took me forever to figure it out. But when I got it, I finally got it. So right now, organizations are still the hierarchical kind of top-down organizations, right? We've got our silos. That's how we operate. But when you start to combine the elements of automation, things like that process automation or process management or machine learning or natural language understanding, whatever kind of automation we're talking about, and new ways of driving labor into our organization, you can actually start to see that there's a lot of different points of intersection that have to break down these silos that we have, right? So think about the way that non-traditional labor force at Pier 1 operates, right? And the way that they might need AI that comes from a broad enterprise approach to actually start providing value to the customers. What I mean is they're not just taking things like an FAQ or a knowledge base to train the AI to provide them answers. They have to understand broader corporate initiatives. We're out of stock on this. We're actually moving in this direction on that. If they want to build out that kind of emotional engagement that they got hired for in the first place, right? They're not there just to answer questions. They're there to drive emotional experiences with customers that actually create the kind of interior decor that makes somebody go home and think, I love Pier 1, right? Like that's what they're trying to do. And so this kind of mapping of all these kinds of automation across all the new kinds of labor is changing the way that brands are thinking about labor force broadly. And I think we've got a head start in the contact center because we've already recognized that the silos inside the organization keep us blinded to data that would actually drive great experiences. So I know you're thinking, it's 2025, I've talked about automation, but I've never just focused on automation. So I want to actually shift gears and talk about a couple of kinds of automation that really will be different in 2025 from today. So one more time, raising hands. This is the last time, I promise. How many of you have read P.G. Woodhouse Jeeves? Not that many. Okay. Well, sorry. P.G. Woodhouse is a classic. Classic author, worth reading. Very, very funny. Very, very difficult to do machine translation on. This is one of my favorites, it's not one sentence, it's two in the English language. Intoxicated, the word did not express it by a mile. He was oiled, boiled, fried, plastered, whiffled, sozzled, and blotto. I'm not sure whiffled and sozzled and blotto are actual words. I'm not sure you would find those in a common dictionary, but do you know what they mean? You do. From context, you know what they mean. The fact that there is repetition of, however, 7 or 8 different synonyms for the same word has meaning. English has one of the largest vocabularies of any language in the world, and we actually use synonyms in a very particular way that a lot of other languages simply do not. Try translating that into Urdu or into Thai or into Afrikaans, and you get gibberish. There might be literal translations, well, maybe not for whiffled, sozzled, and blotto, because those aren't words, but you'd get something. But it would not in any way convey the essence of what Woodhouse was talking about here. So we're not going to see machine translation change the world in 5 years. We are, however, going to see it start to change customer service, because it's not general purpose. We're looking at it for very specific and narrow purposes. If you talk to any of the large customer service outsourcers who are trying to become a presence in Europe, they will, to a one, tell you that machine translation is probably the biggest priority they have. Why? Because language is deterministic in Europe. If you cannot provide the skills required to answer the questions in German and all of the variants of German and French and all the variants of French and Spanish and Italian and Hungarian and Polish and so on, you're not going to win the business. And finding the resources to do that, again, within commuting distance of brick and mortar contact centers is very difficult. So there is a lot of R&D being put into machine translation specifically for constrained domains. We're going to teach it everything there is to know about retail banking terminology, where you're not going to necessarily talk about being whiffled and blottoed, but you might be talking about overdraft fees. You may say that 8 different ways, right? And so in the same way that we're trying to teach AI to understand the 50 ways that you might say, hey, I'm overdrawn on my checking account. Okay, that's a reference from 1994. Sorry about that. Nobody has those anymore. Right, we're going to be doing the same for machine translation. So purpose-driven, narrow, constrained domain machine translation will start to ease the pressure on those of you who have to provide multilingual support. Which means that for brands in the US who are doing support in English only, you can start to do English, Spanish, and French Creole. Without even thinking about it, you might have the same agent doing it. Is it going to be 100% accurate? No. Is it going to be better than not providing support to those customers in their native language at all? Yeah, it will be. So that's one area. The second area where AI and automation is going to completely change is something that I talked about again and again, context. Let me give you an example of what I mean by context in conversational AI. Let's say I am talking today to something like an Alexa device, and I'm also there with my wife, and I say, or actually my girlfriend, let's call her my girlfriend, say, let's get pizza. So with no context, that could mean we want to eat pizza now, we're going to get pizza for a birthday party this weekend, we're going to order from Domino's. You know, if I'm talking to Siri in a grocery store, maybe it means I want to buy pizza there, right? No context does not help in really understanding what let's get pizza means. What happens if you know that it's 7 p.m.? That narrows the window a bit, right? It's probably dinner we're talking about. If I'm in downtown San Francisco, well, that probably doesn't mean the birthday party, right? You start to narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow. What about my past behavior? So I've eaten pizza at Jersey 3 times in the past year, which actually is true. Jersey is a pizza place in downtown San Francisco. Confusing, I know, but I'm a Jersey boy, so I had to go to a pizza place called Jersey. And I'm the kind of guy who's always looking for what's hot and what's new, right, on Yelp. Now you start to think, all right, well, it either means let's eat pizza at Jersey or some new hot place. What about my personal context, right? Not just what I've done, but what I'm doing right now. My calendar says it's date night, I'm wearing one of these, and you see that my heart rate is above normal, and I just bought jewelry. Well, you know, maybe I'm gonna propose over pizza as one does. I'm a classy guy, what can I say? Right, you start to see a very different notion of what conversational AI can do. But who has the data to do all of that? Well, Amazon, and Amazon is kind of trying to do this in your personal life with things like Alexa. Google, same, already trying to do it. Facebook probably already did it. We'll never tell anybody until it comes out in some leak, probably. And Apple, who probably could and probably won't, right? Because of their notions of consumer integrity and privacy. What about 2025? 5 years from now, 5 or 6 years from now? Well, I think the answer is you will be able to do this, but like Apple, you might choose not to, because you might think it's creepy, or you might think it's creepy in certain use cases and not in others, right? Why will you be able to do this? Because these pieces of context are being offered up already as services that you can consume, and consumers are kind of expecting that. And you think of business consortia, right, that share data. There's context that you will be able to get. And if you think that I'm being hyperbolic, there is an enterprise software vendor today who already issues all of their agents Fitbits and monitors their heart rate during interactions for 2 purposes. One, they literally can send help over to an agent who is getting upset, right? Send a floor walker or a supervisor over to actually help them out. But the other is to map it back eventually to the interactions that they're having. Let's look at the case type and the agent's reaction, and we can figure out we need to actually start to provide that agent augmentation that I was talking about earlier for these particular things, because they're the ones that make our agents sweat and fret. Is it creepy? Yeah, I think it's very creepy. Is it helpful for the agents? I hope it will be. It seems like it will be. So you're gonna have to figure out this balancing act between how creepy and how helpful you wanna be. I only have a couple of minutes left, so I wanna run through this next bit pretty quickly. This notion of chatbots and IVA, virtual assistants, we're going to start to think about those differently. We need to start to think about those differently. We need to start to think about them in the same way that we think about human agents today. We need to route them like an agent. Not they will sit up front in every interaction, but maybe for particular products, we will have the virtual agent, and for particular products, we will have the human. In the same way that for a Spanish-speaking customer, we send it to the Spanish-speaking pool of agents, and for English, we send it to English. Or for this kind of use case or case type, we send it to agent A, and for others, we send it to agent B. Scheduled like an agent. Right now, chatbots, if you are deploying them, are impacting your workforce management, whether you recognize it or not. They are starting to change the work that comes to agents, and therefore they're impacting workforce management. The fact that they continually get better through machine learning and ongoing training means they will have an impact in the future, and if you can't predict that impact, your forecast for your human agents will be wrong. You will end up either at under or over capacity, depending on how quickly those chatbots are learning. Quality, measured like an agent. Right now, quality for chatbots are usually measured in things like, did we get the answer right? Not so much like, did the customer love it? Are we analyzing the transcripts with our quality analysts the same way that we do for phone calls and chats today, rather than our conversational designers? Well, we should be, because they're impacting those interactions. They're driving an emotional experience, whether good or bad, so we should be. And then finally, supervised like an agent. So think back to the Botmaster, right? There's somebody watching over what they do, driving that forklift to knock over the crazy truck. And if you think that this is crazy, let me give you 2 examples where brands have already started to do this. So I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I told you I wouldn't do that again. But if there's anybody from Ontario, Canada here, you might be familiar with Excalibur Insurance. It's not a large insurer. But if you go to our team page, you will see this. I took this screenshot about 6 months ago. I checked this morning. It hasn't changed. They don't have much turnover in southern Ontario, apparently, at Excalibur Insurance, and Andrea is still smiling out, but so is Aiden. Aiden's the virtual agent. They put Aiden on the website facing customers to get customers and employees of Excalibur to think about Aiden as just another human being resource who works there, even though it's not a human being. Why did they do that? Well, I think the next story kind of illustrates why. There is a Chinese company that throws a celebration for every agent after that agent has 3 months tenure. A little party, just a little break, something to say, welcome to the team, you've made it over the biggest hump that we have. Typically, their attrition happens at just before 3 months, so if you've made it, you're likely there for a couple of years. They deployed a bot. And they decided, well, 3 months after the bot goes on, we're going to have a party for it, just like the human agent. So why? Why do they do that? Well, they're doing that to get the employees, the other agents, to think about the bot not as something that is there to replace them, but something that is like a teammate to help them. And on the Excalibur side, the same thing. This automation is not here to replace all these human beings that you see. It's just here as part of our team. We're blending human and AI together. That's the goal of both of those case studies, right? And so that, 5 years from now, should be the norm. This is not a prediction. This is a plea. As you go down this path, think about how you might blend the human and AI together so that you don't make your own employees feel like you're trying to replace them, and make your customers feel like the AI is there to augment the human experiences that you also provide to them. If you do that, then you start to really focus on that emotional piece of the 3 E's that I talked about. That's how you can get automation into your customer service experiences without ignoring the emotional component. I have one final slide, and it is a quote, and like the Gandhi story, it might be apocryphal. It is often attributed to somebody, but I could never find any proof that he actually said it. And he's not somebody I even know, so I'm not sure why it's attributed to him. But the first Marquess of Halifax, George Saville, said, "The best qualification of a prophet is to have a good memory." Why did I end there? Well, think about my prediction before, right? I'm not an economist, but if the economy goes south, I know what's going to happen. We need to remember what happened the last time so that we don't do it again. Again, I'm skeptical. I think we are going to do it. I think it's a pitfall we're going to fall into, but maybe not the people in this room. Maybe you will start to think differently and not say the sky is falling, we need to take cost out of our business. Maybe you'll say we need to start to blend AI and humans so that even when the economy is bad, we can get the efficiencies that we need while driving the emotionally engaging experiences that drive our customers' perceptions of their experiences with us. So that would be my plea to you for 2025. If you can bring those 2 things together, you will be the brand that wins in 2025. And with that, I want to say thank you very much. My contact info is up there, but you'll get the slides, so you don't need to take it down. And I will be here at least throughout the morning, so when you're out there, if you have any questions, just come up and talk to me. I don't bite, unless you ask. Okay, thank you very much.